Hey, future Vancouverites, are you thinking of moving to Vancouver? Well, I have a surprise for you. You're probably not gonna end up living in Vancouver. Wait, does that make sense? Oh yeah, it does. Most people that move to the city of Vancouver don't actually end up living in Vancouver. They move to one of Vancouver's many suburbs. And why is that? That's what this video is gonna get to the bottom of. Stick with the video all the way to the end, and it just might help you rethink your entire strategy for moving to Vancouver. Are you ready? I sure am. Let's get going. So the biggest reason people just aren't moving to Vancouver is that Vancouver is a tiny piece of Metro Vancouver. Vancouver is just 110 square kilometers. All of Metro Vancouver is 2,900 square kilometers. There's roughly 700,000 people that live in the city of Vancouver, and there's roughly 2.9 million that live in Metro Vancouver. So Vancouver makes up a very small piece of the entire Lower Mainland. For that reason alone, most people that are moving to quote unquote Vancouver aren't actually ending up in the city of Vancouver. They're ending up in places like Burnaby, Surrey, Langley, North Vancouver. There's just so many, in fact, there's 21 other municipalities aside from the city of Vancouver in the Lower Mainland. So it's best to sort of keep an open mind if you are moving to Vancouver about where you might end up. Also, in terms of geography, Vancouver is growing at a pace of about 5%. In the last 5 years, roughly from 2016 to 2021, Vancouver grew by 4.9%. And most of the suburbs are growing at a faster pace. Most of them, in fact, or many of them are nearly double the pace of the growth of Vancouver. Why is that happening? That's part of what we're trying to understand here. It's just the amount of space that the city takes up, but it's also Vancouver is a established city. It's been built out. You know, if you've been watching my videos, you'll know it's really been built out since the 70s. It's such a small city, so densely populated. There's just very little room to grow, and the growth that has to happen needs to happen a little more slowly because it's converting existing zoning to new zoning. The only way for the city of Vancouver to grow is up, not out, unless you go out into the suburbs. Whereas cities like Langley, like Maple Ridge, like Surrey, have a lot of space to expand, and they can very quickly, once they decide that they want to grow, they can very quickly do just that. And in fact, very interestingly, Surrey is going to overtake the city of Vancouver in just 6 years. By 2029, the city of Surrey will have a greater population than the city of Vancouver. That really just blows my mind. As a lifelong Vancouver resident, Surrey just seemed like a backwater, a place where nothing much happened, a place where, frankly, you didn't really want to live, where today it's seen so much growth, so much development. It's not the fastest growing suburb of Vancouver because it has such a large population base, but there are massive amounts of development going on in Surrey. And in fact, in other suburbs, I went over that in a recent video, the fastest growing suburbs in the Lower Mainland, suburbs like Langley, Maple Ridge, New Westminster, North Vancouver, and I'm missing one. Which one am I missing? Oh yeah, White Rock. That's the one that I'm missing. But a lot of growth in the suburbs. So one of the biggest things that's going to keep people from settling in the city of Vancouver versus the suburbs is price. And if you're coming from just about anywhere else and most places in Canada, Vancouver is going to seem quite expensive. The city core is relatively expensive, but the suburbs in relative terms are fairly affordable. And there's a big disparity whether you're renting or buying in values in Vancouver versus the suburbs. And I'm going to consult my notes here, but in the city of Vancouver, a typical house right now is $2,648,300. That's September 2023. Compare that to New Westminster, where you can get a typical house, for $1,538,600, or all the way out in Mission, you can get one for $1,050,800. So 2.5 times the value if you're moving to the city of Vancouver versus Mission. If you're looking for a place to get a better value, obviously further out into the suburbs is where you're gonna find it. And that's one of the reasons that a place like Maple Ridge and Mission is seeing so much growth. Now let's look at townhouses. In the city of Vancouver, a typical townhouse is now $1,333,700. In New Westminster, it's $971,900. And in Mission, it's $673,100. So about half the cost of the city of Vancouver if you're looking at a townhouse. And then for condos, it's $812,000 in the city of Vancouver, it's $661,900 in New West, and it's $457,900 in Mission. So again, you're looking at a little over half, but a big gap in the values. Obviously, if you're looking for a single family detached, that's where you're gonna get the strongest values out in the suburbs. But a lot of people, no matter what they're buying, are gonna be motivated by price. And that's one of the big reasons that you may not end up living in the city of Vancouver. If you're trying to figure out where the best place to live in Vancouver is, well, I can help you with that. Reach out anytime. My contact information is right there on the screen. Over my 15-year career as a real estate agent, I've helped hundreds of families move to the city of Vancouver, and I can help you too. Let's get that conversation going just by contacting me anytime, no pressure, just a conversation. Now let's get back to the video. The next big reason that people are looking at the suburbs as an alternative to Vancouver is space. Whether that's the space that you're surrounded by or the space that you're living in, you can get more of it when you move out to the suburbs. And I think, one of the things in some of my videos that I've talked about is how small some of the homes in the city of Vancouver can be. Whether you're buying a condo, a townhouse, or a house, you get more of those things, of that space when you move out into the suburbs. Most people, especially when they're having families, are gonna want some green space, whether that's green space attached to a condo, townhouse, duplex, or a house. You are more likely to find that in the suburbs than you are in the city of Vancouver. And you're also more likely to have a little more space between you and your neighbors. The plots of land in the city of Vancouver are much smaller. And so people that value that space are more likely to be driven out into the suburbs to places like Mission, Maple Ridge, Surrey, and Langley than to the city of Vancouver in areas like Main Street, Kitsilano, Fraser. So that's one of the big reasons that people will stick to the suburbs rather than the city of Vancouver. The suburbs are becoming a much more desirable place to live. They're changing. They're not as quote unquote suburban as they once were. And getting around and through the Lower Mainland is becoming considerably easier. So number one, I would say, is transit and commuting times have improved considerably over the last 10 years, 20 years maybe. But specifically because of improvements in the highway system, improvements in transit, and most specifically in the SkyTrain. And so if I was living in the suburbs, I'd be looking at a suburb that was located along either the SkyTrain route or along the West Coast Express if I wanted to commute into the city. Because I'd want to do anything that I could to avoid sitting in my car. In fact, I used to have a colleague many, many years ago in a previous career when I was an IT consultant. I bought a condo in Kitsilano, just blocks away from our office, and he bought a house for the exact same price on the Sunshine Coast. My commute to work was 5 minutes every day. He had to commute an hour and a half each way, but because we were consultants, he could bill time. He was taking transit. He would take the ferry and then the bus once he got on the mainland, and he would just spend an hour of each commute actually working. And so it was a productive time for him. And that's, if I was commuting, that's what I would try and do as well. I think a lot of people are viewing, being in the suburbs as not as much of a burden as perhaps it once was, especially if they can be on those transit lines and that the commutes are easier. That's one of the things that's really drawing people to the suburbs and making them a much more viable option over living in the city of Vancouver. And the other part of, the suburbs becoming less suburban is that they're really developing into hubs of their own. So places that you want to spend time in, and not just bedroom communities of the city of Vancouver. And they have vibrant, interesting community centers of their own where there's actual jobs. And you may find that you might live in Mission and work in Langley, or live in Langley and work in Surrey. And so it's less and less likely that people need to move into the suburbs and then commute all the way into the city of Vancouver. It might be the case for you, but more and more frequently, people are finding there's so much development that's happened in places like Burnaby or in Surrey or in Langley, where there's very good job opportunities in all of those cities. And on top of that, they're just much more vibrant, interesting communities with actual city centers that aren't so reliant on the city center of the city of Vancouver. And so you can spend your entire life in those communities completely self-sufficient and not need to go anywhere else if you don't want to. Hey, real quick, if you're getting any kind of value out of this video, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up. It lets me know that I'm on the right track, that I'm making videos that people actually want to watch. Plus, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more of me. I do put out videos just like this one about moving to and living in Metro Vancouver every single week. Now let's get back to the video. Another big thing that's moving people to the suburbs is family. And if you are single or a young couple, a professional couple, you're probably more likely to be moving to and living in Vancouver. But if you're a family, if there's more of you, you're probably more likely to be moving to the suburbs. And so one of the reasons for that is obviously the price. Another reason is that you're getting more space, but it's also that the communities are set up more for families than the city of Vancouver. Partially that's because we're seeing more growth. We're seeing more families move to those areas. So they're providing more services and offering more to families with young children. So it's much easier to get into schools. It's much easier to get into daycares. It's much easier to get into classes and programs for children than it is in the city of Vancouver. In Vancouver, it can be a dogfight. I've talked about this in some videos in the past, where it's like winning the lottery just to get into a daycare. Or, the fact that I couldn't get my children into a swimming lesson for 2 years. You move to a place like Surrey, that doesn't happen. There's a much greater variety of options and services provided for children. So that's one more reason that people are finding that the suburbs are a little more welcoming than the city of Vancouver, and why you may end up finding that you're gonna end up in the suburbs rather than in the city. And another reason that a lot of people may not end up living in Vancouver is the weather. And if you've watched my videos in the past, I've talked about this before. In this one video, I'm gonna link right there specifically about weather in the Lower Mainland in Metro Vancouver. There is a lot of variety in the type of weather. And so if you don't wanna be in the wettest part of the city, you may not want to be in and around the city of Vancouver itself. You may want to be in one of the suburbs. So an area like White Rock, like Tawasin, South Surrey, or Delta, those are suburbs of Vancouver that are seeing quite a bit of growth, but that are much drier than the city of Vancouver specifically, but also some of the northern suburbs, especially the northern suburbs like North Vancouver, Coquitlam, Port Moody, Mission, Maple Ridge. Those are all suburbs that are known for being a lot wetter. So you're going from in as much as 3 times as much moisture in the course of a year in those suburbs than some of those southern suburbs. And that's what's going to drive a lot of people away from, or not a lot, but many people will decide to move away from the city of Vancouver and move into some of those drier and sunnier suburbs if weather is a big motivating factor for you. And there you have it, all the reasons that if you're moving to Vancouver, you may not actually end up in Vancouver. I'd love to hear from you. Comment down below. Let me know where you are thinking of moving and why. Hit that like button if you got any kind of value out of this video. Hit subscribe if you want to see more of me. I do put out videos like this one every single week. And then there's my contact information right there on the screen. Reach out anytime. If you're thinking of moving to Vancouver, I can help you figure out exactly where you should end up, and we can figure that out together. In the meantime, I do put out videos just like this one, including these 2 videos right here that I think you're really gonna like. Thank you so much for watching. I'm gonna see you next week.